Hi, told you the video was coming. Forgive the appearance. I am fresh out of the shower, but I wanted to make sure to get this going. And since I'm in a completely different location than normal, I'm going to have all kinds of new things to fidget with, like what I was just doing. So sorry, bear with me. All right, I don't know. I think this one is going to be just one of the chapters, and then I'm going to see how I feel. I might have to come back and do the other chapters after this, but I'm going to do, I think this is the longest one first. So let's do that share screen thing. And here we go. So chapter 31 has to do with plants. I'm going to kind of like through some of it, but we'll get it. We'll get it there. All righty. Yeah, you know how I do. I skip through that first part. All right, first we're going to look at the domestication of crops that changed human history, because before we started actually domesticating crops, it was really just hunting and gathering, which was briefly mentioned at the beginning of this term when we were talking about the human evolution part. So it says quite some thousand years ago, like several thousand years ago, we started, oh, I can't think of the word. I was going to say critiquing, but that's not quite right. We started mucking about and figuring out how we could make stuff grow where we wanted instead of only finding it. And they have found that wheat is one of the very first crops that were actually cultivated. Now, if you take a look at this, like over 10,000 years ago, most of our wheat was wild and only a small portion of it was domesticated. By the time we got to 6,500 years ago, most of our wheat was domesticated. Very little of it was wild. And so this is just kind of showing that it happened pretty quickly. This just a little thing showing you some of the major food crops around the world. And I always get distracted by this because I always end up going, bananas. And honestly, until I taught this kind of thing, I didn't know that they came from Indonesia. I really didn't. But anyway, skip on over. This is what I want to get to because this has to do with your lab that I am going to tell you to do. We want to make sure that you understand, like I'm more than one person, I want to make sure that you understand that there's two major clades. We have what is called a monocot and a eudicot, or you can just call it dicot. Mono for one, di for two. And if you remember, EU is true. So that's pretty much this. This has to do with the cotyledons. And so this is the seed leaf. So when you hear cotyledon, that is the seed leaf. And I'll show you. If you take a look here, you'll see for the seed leaves, monocot, it shows you basically a piece of corn, and eudicot like a bean. And if you look inside, you see one cotyledon for the corn, and you see two for the eudicot. This is not the easiest thing to identify unless you're going to cut open the seed, the bean, in order to look at it. What I drill into your head is the leaf veins and the flowers. So for the leaf veins, if they are parallel, then that is a monocot. If they are branched, that's a dicot. Then you look at the floral parts, so your flower petals. If they are multiple of three, that tends to be a monocot. If it is a multiple of 4 or 5, that is a dicot, which is the more evolved type plant. Now, I said for the monocot, multiples of 3, and for the dicot, multiples of 4 or 5. So what would you do if you looked at the flower petals and you counted 12? Think that one through. Clearly, you can't answer me on this, but normally in class I say that, and then I actually try to make you answer it. But I'll go ahead and explain. 12 is, you can divide 12 by 3, or you can divide 12 by 4. It's 3 times 4. So you wouldn't know just by the flower petals if it's a monocot or a dicot. That's when you look at your leaf veins. So if it had 12 petals and the leaf veins were parallel, like grass, that would be a monocot. If they were branched, like that bottom leaf down there, then that would be a dicot. Your lab is going to be based on this. I'm going to just have it all written up, and then you'll have to, just do what it says, but totally, this is what your whole lab's based on. Our plants, we have the different organ systems, just like an animal, different organ systems. So an organ consists of several types of tissues that together carry out particular functions. So here for the plant, we have roots, stems, and leaves. Each of these are various organs, basically. You have your root system. The root system is everything that is below the ground, and the shoot system is everything that is above the ground. You see a whole lot of words here. Not worrying about this. You've already seen the picture. You're going to have to label, and we'll get to it. Here, I'm just trying to make sure you understand root system is below the ground, shoot system is above. And then it's just closer picture. So what's happened are these three basic plant organs, they've been adapted for a whole bunch of different functions. Some of them is to store food, some is to promote asexual reproduction, and some is to provide protection. Here we go. These are different modified stems. What you eat is the tuber. I mean, when you're eating a potato, you're eating a tuber. And that is a modified stem. Crazy, right? The strawberry plant's the one I think is interesting. If you look at the runner, that's actually how they will reproduce. They will scooch on out, and then when it touches the ground, it will root, and that will be a whole brand new strawberry plant. Why was I forgetting the word plant? I don't know. Oh. This is a way that a plant can modify its leaves in order to protect itself. So that's literally what the cactus did. All those little spiny things are modified leaves. We're going to skip over most of this. We are going to talk about the stomata in just a moment. All right, here's the main part for plants that you're going to have to remember. We've got the vascular tissue system. Vascular meaning like veins. This is where it's going to move things around. We have the xylem, which will bring the water and dissolved minerals around, and the phloem that will transport the sugars. And I will tell you over and over again, xylem up, phloem down. Say it with me, xylem up, phloem down. And then the ground tissue system functions in the storage, photosynthesis, and support. So here's my reminding you again, xylem up, phloem down. This appears in a couple of different PowerPoints where the plants are covered. So xylem up, phloem down. Not going to worry about that part. Most plant cells have three unique structures. We covered this. We covered this in Bio 1, 2, 3 when we talked about the animal cell and the plant cell. They have chloroplasts, the central vacuole, and then the cell wall. So, and here it is. Are you going to have to label this? No. No, you already labeled the cell in Bio 1, 2, 3. We're not doing it again. And we're going to skip over this because I was forced to take botany and I really hated having to do all this parenchyma crap. So we're not doing that. There we go. But we are going to talk about this one. You see in bold, it says determinate growth and interdeterminate growth. Determinate growth is what most animals are. Notice I say most, and I'm going to explain why. This means that once it gets to be a certain size, it stops growing. Like you don't have, as adorable as kittens are, and we know I love kittens, they grow and they grow and then they stop growing. Same thing for a horse, giraffe, elephant. The one difference here for animals, lobsters. Lobsters continue to grow their entire life. And that's actually why you tend not to see super old lobsters, is because of the exoskeleton. They get so big, the exoskeleton weighs them down too much and it kills them. Talk about like not a great deal there, right? But anyway, plants, they keep growing. They will grow pretty much for their entire life. They just keep on growing. So that's kind of cool. These are characterized, there's that word, having trouble with again, by the length of their life cycle. So an annual completes their life cycle in 1 year, hence annual. Biennials, 2 years, and then perennials live for many years. So if you have ever wondered why the things are listed that way, that's why. Yeah. Okay, well, I do want to point out, did anyone know that this is basically the carrots reproducing? It's like, hey, we're ready. I thought that was kind of cool. So we talked about the xylem up, phloem down. The secondary xylem is what we know as wood when we're talking about a tree. The secondary phloem is what we think of as bark. And I think that's kind of cool. And it has to do with that as the xylem goes up and the phloem comes down. Each year, it's going one step farther out, one step farther out. And so if you have ever heard that you can age a tree by the number of rings, that's what it's from. It's from the xylem up and the phloem down. So I think that's kind of cool. And this is just showing you, there's your rings of the log in order to age it, whatever you would call it. And that's where the xylem had gone up multiple times. And then again, the phloem is on the outer part, that's the bark. And I think there's a picture coming up where I talk a little more about this one. Oh, here we come. We're coming to that thing that I said you're going to have to label. So we are going to talk about the sexual reproduction of angiosperms, and it's going to include these various parts. I'm going to talk about them with the picture. So here's the picture. The stamen, if you see the cursor, the stamen over here, this is the male part. The stamen includes the anther and the filament. So the anther's on the top, that's what holds all the pollen. And the filament is this part. So the filament holds the anther up high. So whichever pollinator is around there, they're likely to rub on it and get the pollen. Then we have this part, carpel. The carpel is the female part. So we have the stigma at the top, and this one, it's almost like it's sticky, and I'm going to explain why in just a second. So we've got the stigma at the top, the style, which leads down to the ovary, and inside the ovary is the ovule. So basically the egg. And so this would be the male part. This would be the female part. This is known as a complete flower. Complete because it has both male and female. There are flowers that are only male or only female. Those would be listed as incomplete. Now the rest, the petal. So I think hopefully everybody knows what a flower petal is. That's the petal. This throws people. Sometimes this is the sepal. So if you have ever watched as a flower is like this, it looks like a little bud, and then it slowly starts to open. That's the sepal you see. So when it first begins, you've got the sepal, and then the sepal is what spreads out, and then the flower comes out the center. And I don't have it listed here, but this bottom part is known as the receptacle. And so that's the part that's, you know, the base of the flower. But this is what you will be labeling on your next test. Oh, and I said I was going to come back to it. So say that a bee comes over to this flower. This pollen gets stuck onto the bee and everything. When it lands on the next one, sometimes the pollen is going to get rubbed onto here. So what happens, and I think there might be an image of this later. If it is, I'm going to say, hey, that's what I was talking about. The pollen will then stick here and then grow these pollen tubules that will go down the style, and it will be two. And it does something called double fertilization. So it's going to fertilize the seed, the ovule, to make a new, well, baby plant, basically. But it's also going to create something called endosperm, which is, you know, kind of like the little nutrition packet, for lack of a better phrase. And we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, you already have learned previously about haploid and diploid. And for animals, we said, you know, the haploid is the egg or the sperm, the diploid is the zygote where the two come together. Well, for the plant, it's called a sporophyte. And For animals, we have gametes, but for plants, we have gametophytes. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I was already talking about. This is an image showing you what I was talking about with the pollen grain on the stigma, and then the two sperm and the pollen tubes coming down and doing the double fertilization. So that's what I was talking about a second ago. And here it is again, double fertilization and endosperm. See, food storing tissue called endosperm. Now, what I'm going to say about the endosperm is this is a way you can really mess with people's heads, because, you know, I like to do that. And I know some of you do too. So if you think of popcorn, if you have your little popcorn seed, and when you pop it, it goes, and it's that nice, wonderful, fluffy white stuff. And most people like popcorn. Well, that stuff that you eat, that is literally the endosperm all puffed up for you. The little harder piece that you're like, and you're taking out of your teeth or whatever, that little harder piece is normally either the seed coat or what could have been a new plant when you planted it, depending on which part you're getting. But that poof part, that is literally the endosperm. So you can mess with people when they're eating popcorn and go, how's that endosperm? You know, it's just a nutrition thing, but people get weird when you have that word in there. So it's just kind of funny. This is just showing you how the development of the eudicot embryo. And so again, it's going to have gotten fertilized here. It makes the zygote and then eventually becomes our seed. So it's got the seed, it's got the endosperm, it's got the seed coat. And yeah. So this is showing you some more for our monocot and eudicot. And I had said before that, you know, it's like a corn seed or a bean. This is why, because these are the images always used. And it's just trying to show you that this one, the two cotyledons, you've got your little baby plant. So this is the embryo basically, and the little tiny leaves that'll be coming out. And then this one, look, there's the little itty bitty embryonic root and shoot. And yeah, and how they plant is, I think we have a picture coming up. It's either, I'm pretty sure it's this PowerPoint. Anyway, fruit. Fruit is a mature ovary. That's literally what it is. And so where you might mess with somebody's head talking about the bucket of endosperm when they go to the movies, you can also walk up to somebody as they bite into an apple and go, how's that ovary? And whoo, people freak out over that one too. But that's literally what it is. A fruit is just a mature ovary in order to protect the seed and help it move along. And so that's what it is. So any fruit you eat, pretty much, it's just an ovary. Now, what's really interesting is when you start finding out what things are actually fruits that we don't think about as fruit. So our pea pod, peas, that's fruit. The pea pod itself is fruit. So a snow pea, that's a fruit. We don't think of it that way, but that's what it is. So the pea pod itself is basically a mature ovary, and it's full of all the tiny seeds. All of these are types of fruits. And so, yes, these nuts are technically fruits. Pretty cool. I'm pretty sure everybody already knows that a tomato is a fruit, right? If it also, another way to know is if it comes from a flower, it's a fruit. So think of zucchini blossoms. It blossoms and then the zucchini grows out of that. So zucchini is technically a fruit. And I love telling people this because I'll be eating sometimes some soup and someone will come up and say, oh, what are you eating? And I will answer with fruit soup, because most of the things in a vegetable soup, most of those things are technically fruit. Not all of the things. A carrot is still a vegetable and a potato is still a vegetable. Although technically, no, we'll move on. I don't know if we really need this. I think it's funny though to refer to a seed as an escape pod. That just kind of is amusing. But basically, that's what it is, because you've got the seed, you've got the little embryo in there, and it's just laying there, just chilling, doing nothing, waiting until the right time. Then when it's in the proper atmosphere, the proper environment, it's got the proper dirt, it's got the water, it's got everything it needs, then it wakes up and it sprouts. And this was one of the images I was waiting to get to. I think we're going to show a monocot also, but this is a eudicot. So it's going to start losing its seed coat a little bit as it extends its root. And then it slowly pops up, and then it pops open, and then it goes up. So this, if you ever grow a bean plant, and I know it's not called a bean plant, but you know what I mean. Because if you're going to, plant a lima bean or something, this is what you'll get. These little shriveled up things at the bottom, these are not seeds. I mean, not leaves. These are the cotyledon. That's what you're seeing. So I think that's kind of cool. Nifty thing. I think we might cover this in a different PowerPoint, or it might be at the end of this. I don't know. What causes the root to come down like this is called gravitropism, where the plant knows which way gravity is. And that's why no matter how you put the seed in there, the root is going to go down. You can actually, if you have a clear cup and you plant the seed up against the side so you can watch as the root comes out, if as the root goes down, you reach in there and flip the seed over real quick. Well, I mean, you don't have to be real quick. I say real quick, but you can take your time. It's not like it's going to know. You can take the seed out and turn it over and stick it back in there. As long as you haven't messed up the root, it will then continue to grow back down to force its way back up. It's really cool, but that's called gravitropism. It can totally tell where the gravity is. Now, the corn and other monocots use something different for breaking the ground. So instead of like this, what happens here is it stays in the ground. You never see the cotyledon. So the corn there, it just pops the two things out. So the taproot goes down and the shoot comes up. So you will never see that withered leaf thing because it stays put. We've talked about some of this before. Clone asexually produced. It is genetically identical. So you can just clip it, plant it, you've got a clone. And we also have the other ones that I showed you a second ago with the strawberry plant where it stretches out. So that's what a lot of these things, it's just talking about how they can reproduce asexually. Yeah. Oh, hey, how about that? We finished it. Yay. So that's the main part you need from this PowerPoint is xylem up, phloem down, and labeling the flower. And yeah, I think that's going to be it. I think I'm done for the videos for now. And hopefully I'll get the others made tomorrow. But at least we got one, and I will be posting the lab very soon. Chances are I will have posted it by the time you see this, so you can just pretend I never said that. Just remember the monocot dicot stuff. That's what the lab is going to be pertaining to. And I might actually I think I'm going to add one other thing into there. Anyway, that's it. Peace.